athletes in strength sports from across the world. And today we're interviewing the famous Lisa. I don't want to mess up your last name. It's Flanders.
Yeah.
Who is a physiotherapist. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and say what you do?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. My name is Lisa Flanders. I'm a physiotherapist. I work in Ottawa, Ontario. I am a women's health and pelvic floor physiotherapist, and I co-founded Bloom Integrative Health and Movement Center, which is a multidisciplinary clinic. Our focus is health for all individuals. We do have a special focus on women's health and pre and postnatal care, as well as care through like the menopausal period, but we do treat everybody. We treat all ages, all genders, and we have a team of 8 physiotherapists. We have massage therapy, osteopathy, naturopathic medicine, chiropractic care. We do clinical exercise, one-on-one and in groups, so group rehab, which is really like a fun thing that we're one of the only clinics that does that in Ottawa. And yeah, we're just like a really awesome team. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead with some questions. I know that we know each other personally. I've worked with you. You're amazing. You helped me with my issues. I'm like ongoing with women working out, having a little bit of stress incontinence, especially as we have children and whatnot. So, and this is something that we've talked about on the podcast before. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you specifically, because I think it's an important issue that people are embarrassed about and they don't want to talk about.
Absolutely.
So my first question is, can you tell me how you got into physiotherapy and what made you specialize like in the pelvic floor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pelvic floor, but with women?
Absolutely. So I wanted to be a physiotherapist for as long as I could remember. When I was 15, I was a pretty reasonable, high-level competitive swimmer, like at the provincial level, not really at the national level. And I ended up with a shoulder injury. And so I went through my own course of physiotherapy as a teenager, and I just thought it was like a really cool profession. From 15 on, I wanted to be a physio. And then I took this really roundabout way to get there. I like would change my mind and my career paths for many, many years. And so when I was 28, I had a bachelor degree, and I ended up applying to physio school and moving to Kingston, Ontario to do that. I'm from Manitoba. So it took me a little while to get there, but I ended up graduating from my physio master's degree at 30. So when people tell me that they're like, oh, I want to go back to school, but I think I'm too old, I'm just like, no, I graduated from my master's at 30. It's not a problem.
Yeah. That's awesome, actually.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we can do our careers if we want to. When I first started physio, I really thought that I wanted to work with like neurological patients. So people with spinal cord injuries and like stroke rehab, acquired brain injuries. And I did this amazing placement in stroke rehab and acquired brain injuries when I was doing my education. And as much as it like is very rewarding, it's also very emotional. And I can imagine. I found myself coming home every day and being like really upset about the people that I was working with and like the struggles that they were having. And so I just thought maybe not the field that I should go into for my own mental health. So I started working in orthopedic physiotherapy for about 6 months, and it was okay. Like a lot of office workers, a lot of things like neck pain, back pain related to sitting at their desk. But I always felt there was like this little piece of physio that I was missing, because we don't learn about pelvic health a lot in school. So I thought I'd take my training and learn a little bit more about it. And much like whenever you take sort of continuing education courses, you get really excited about them. And then sometimes you go and apply them and it doesn't work out the way that you want it to.
Yeah, for sure.
But with pelvic health, my very first pelvic health patient had such amazing success in such a short period of time. And I was like, yes, this is where I need to be, because I'm changing someone's life here for the better. So I decided I wanted to like deep dive into pelvic health. Really started like promoting pelvic health, taking tons and tons of courses. I still take tons of courses in pelvic health and like related fields. And that's sort of how I ended up working within women's and pelvic health. And because I have a bit of like a weightlifting, CrossFit background, it's just sort of seemed natural to also, sort of apply that to weightlifting and CrossFit and like physical activity and how we can help people be
That's
active.
kind of how we met. We were at the same gym, and
Yeah,
you mentioned, yeah. So it's good that you actually not just you're not just like an armchair physiotherapist. You actually apply it in your own life, like,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know.
And one thing that was really cool on my course is, so I had like lifelong what's called latchkey urgency. So, and a lot of women have this. When you sort of get home from work, you put your key in the door, and then suddenly like, you have to
Oh,
so bad,
yeah, totally
right?
understand that.
And I took this course, and they asked like, who does this happen to anybody? And I like put my hand up being like, oh, I thought that was just me. And we like learned how to manage that. And I started applying that in my own life. And I'd had, latchkey urgency for 20 some odd years. And now it's
Okay.
completely gone. Like I can go home, I can go leave work, I can go run errands, I can get home from work, I can put my stuff away and like still very confidently make it to the washroom. So that was really cool, like a little way that I applied it to myself as well.
So part of the
So
reason
this
why
is
we brought you on, Lisa, was because of the
yeah.
fact that it's very, very taboo, this subject in
Incontinence, yeah.
weightlifting. And it's something that Jessica Fitton, one of the strongest women in the world, there was a big controversy with Strongman Corp because they had asked women to start cleaning up their own pee on the platform when they're lifting these super heavy weights, right, at the national level. And there's a lot of body shaming, right? There's women who've gone through, have tried to get rehab and have not been successful. And there's some that have. So it's just a very hot topic. And as a dance and fitness instructor, your health, I have proven that multicultural dance, because it's primarily for women in the hips, it builds those pelvic floor muscles. That women's strength, like their pelvic floor health, their butt, right, the size of their butt, how much their butt is, their strength in their hips is pivotal to their health. That is very female specific. So I want to know more about the science from your perspective. We really want to get into that today. Our theme obviously is like getting back in the spring, getting that pep back in your step, getting, ready to be physically active in the summer. And obviously with the 2-year lockdown, there's been a lot of folks who, been sitting, and we know sitting is horrible for your pelvic floor, right? Especially for women once again. So I know Hilda's got lots of great questions for you, but I definitely want to really focus in on touch on that, because that's something that a lot of women struggle with in the weightlifting community. We have a lot more postpartum moms lifting and lifting during pregnancy. So something that they need practical tips for, whether or not they have that issue, but something to prevent, right? And also figure out how to deal with once you have it. So anyways, continue on.
All right.
And Hilda, if you first tune in, say Hilda Siegel. She's a power lifter. She's a pole instructor. She's amazing. She's a bodybuilder. She's an incredible woman. She has tons of experience. And that's exactly why we have her on the show. So if you're new to the show, she recently became a co-host with us, and she's amazing. So anyways, go on, Hilda.
Thanks, Stephanie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I just saw someone cut out, that's why. So you're very much somebody that helps your clients in a practical application. So I'm wondering if you can explain to our listeners some of the techniques that you use.
Yeah. So I am definitely the type of physiotherapist that really likes to focus your home exercise program into the things that are really important to you. I have a lot of women that come into the clinic and they're like, I've been doing my Kegels and I sit in the car and every time I'm at a light, I do my Kegels and I'm still getting leakage when I run. And I go, okay, well, like you're doing your Kegels practicing in a car. Do you have leakage in the car? Like that's not very functional. So
Okay.
So when I am working with someone, I'm looking at what is very meaningful to them. So for example, like if someone says, you know what, I leak when I do a squat, we'll try to first of all evaluate that squat technique, and then apply along with the rest of our evaluation, and apply their homework to that task, right? So I'm not going to say, okay, so now you're having leakage when you squat, go sit in the car and do, Kegels every time you see a red car or whatever it may be, because that's not functional to real life. So I like to really break down like what is important to you and apply your homework to your skill or your meaningful task. So for example, like let's use running as an example, because that's a really common one. So when someone comes in and says they're leaking when they're running, I'm going to look at two different things. I'm going to look at what their thoracic rotation is, so how their rib cage is moving in a rotational pattern. And then I'm also going to look at how they manage their balance on a single leg stance, because that can really give us some good feedback about some things that we need to be looking at. And then we break down and we start to apply their homework to what their task is, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I know you've helped me with my squat too. So one of the reasons I thought of you for the show, because I just think it's a really important topic. Can you tell us about what you do to keep, or what you do to help keep healthy while running a business yourself? Because I mean, you must have so much going on, right?
Yes. And this last year has probably been my like least healthy year, unfortunately. I do try at like the bare minimum to do an hour-long walk every day. So I have a 15-month-old puppy, so that luckily gets me out the door and walking on, like the days I don't, like in the middle of winter, I was walking, an hour a day at least. I do try to do some form of like strength training at least 2 times a week. My goal would be closer to 4 to 5, but it just depends on the week and what my schedule is like. And I really believe that we can do like very small activity, like very small workouts and still get really good benefits. So I definitely try to keep my workouts to less than 45 minutes, because that's the time that I have available.
Well, so there's a whole thing about trigger sessions. I don't know if you've heard that, where you can just do like 15 minutes at it, and you're still, yes, you're not getting, I guess, the same, but at least it's better than doing nothing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? I think I used to be the type of person that was like, I'm going to go to the gym and I have to do exactly an hour and a half and I have to do this. And then it got to the point where my workouts were so long and so boring, I would dread doing them. So I just said, you know what? I have time for 5 movements.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I'm going to do. And then the other thing, I do try to meditate if I can. And that has unfortunately gone out the window the last year, just with the dog.
I tried to go through that too. It's hard. It's hard to do everything you need to do.
Oh, absolutely. But, going for a walk, and I can sort of like, I don't wear earphones, so I just sort of enjoy nature when I'm doing that. But that's like things that I do to try to stay healthy while running a business. I also take it, and this is new for me, I take an hour-long lunch break, which I never used to do. And part of my lunch break is actually going home to let the dog out for half an hour. So we go play in the yards. So we get, it's like a nice little break up in my day.
Yeah, I could see that keeping it, definitely helping out too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my next question is, how is it working with athletes compared to the general population? And do you have any specific tips? For strength athletes that we can use?
So I love working with athletes because for the most part, someone who has been very active for a good portion of their life has really good body awareness. And that makes my job so much easier than sometimes people in the general population. And I mean, my mom is probably going to listen to this podcast because I will share it.
Okay.
But I'm going to use my mom as an example. Because I'm a physio, so she'll often like ask me for advice or like, can you give me an exercise for this? And I remember I gave her some exercise for her shoulder, and then a year went by, and because she doesn't live in Ottawa, and I saw her and she's doing this like really weird exercise, and I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, this is the exercise you gave me. And I was like, I absolutely did not give that to you. Like, that seems super unfunctional. I think it was like this. So I do really enjoy working with athletes because they have that little bit heightened body awareness, and then also the big drive to want to do it, to want to do what we're doing.
Yeah, so that they can improve their performance.
Yeah. So for strength athletes, a big thing that I start to look at is what their squat looks like. And I think you're probably all familiar with like a butt wink, right?
Yes.
With squats.
Yes.
So a butt wink is a very big cue for me that person has a little bit of like a hypertonic pelvic floor. So they are actually a little bit tight, and we actually have to work a little bit on lengthening the pelvic floor so that it can be very functional throughout the bottom of the squat. Yeah, so like with a butt wink, that's where I'll typically start. Like we'll start doing some release exercises. I usually like very simple. I usually get someone to like sit on a ball just on the inside of their sit bone for a little bit, and then we'll like test and retest.
You do that too, actually.
Yeah, I give it to a lot of people. It's a very common exercise I give. It's a very common exercise I give because yes, it's really important if you have a butt wink. It's also very important for like people that sit at a desk all day, because most of the time when we sit at a desk, our tailbone starts to tuck under, our tailbone and sacrum start to tuck under. So we end up kind of with that little bit of like a butt wink in standing. So it's a really important exercise. But I always, like, a lot of people think that they need to be doing Kegels and that's going to make them stronger. I would say 90% of my clients actually need to work on lengthening the pelvic floor first before we apply a pelvic floor muscle activation.
And the Kegels that you showed, like when I'm using you as an example, are not exactly like the traditional Kegels that you like that I've learned in like a prenatal class or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I'll typically identify like what part of the muscle needs to be lengthened and what part of the muscle needs to be strengthened. So a lot of my lifting athletes, we need to work on lengthening the back part of the pelvic floor. And then we work on strengthening the front part of the pelvic floor. And then we apply that to the lift. So if you're bracing, when we hold our breath and we brace, a lot of people just brace by pushing everything out.
Yeah, and that makes it worse.
That makes things worse. What I try to do with my strength athletes is show them how to kind of create a little bit of like a support first, and then it's something for them to push against, if that makes sense. So we're supporting the pelvic floor and the deep core, and then they're using their Valsalva to push against that, to give them a little bit more support, help them feel stronger, and hopefully be able to lift a little bit heavier without concerns.
Okay. Since you brought up Valsalva, can you explain what that is, just for people who don't understand?
Yeah, so a Valsalva is anytime we do an effortful task and we do it by holding our breath. So I remember being in physio school and being like, no, we should never Valsalva. It's the worst.
I remember that even in personal training, they said
that we should never do it. And yes, maybe if you're like a 70-year-old man that has like heart concerns, that's maybe not a good thing to do. But if you're like a young, healthy individual, or if it's something that you've learned to do appropriately, I think that it can be a really great technique to help you feel a little bit stronger. So a Valsalva is when we take a really long breath in, hold our breath at the top, so full breath, and then we sort of brace by pushing out before we do like
or whatever.
So you're pushing.
Don't touch someone. I'm recording a podcast, recording a show.
Oh, sorry.
Guys, the door's locked.
Stephanie, you're on. We can hear you. Oh,
there we go.
I'm being attacked. The minions have entered.
Sorry about that.
Help! SOS. So going back to some things I was listening to that you're saying there about the butt wink. That was funny, and it's a very good cue. And inches make a huge difference on what happens, like in terms of form. And there's a guest we're going to be having on our show. He wrote the Whiteboard Daily book, and he's awesome. And he's all about making stick figures and teaching people about cueing. But like you said, as a dancer, I'm always teaching people that stretching and lengthening the muscles is so, so huge, because before becoming a strongman athlete, a powerlifting athlete, I have always had really long muscles, right, from a career in dance. And so when I switched to being a lifter, I got so stiff and I saw a huge difference. But I went back into adding all those exercises I did in dance, and I got my flexibility back, but I got injured because I stopped doing that. So very important to have the long muscles, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And then, going back to the butt wink too, and you mentioned like glute strength a little while back. Your glutes are your antagonist to the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor flexes the sacrum and the tailbone one way, and the glutes flex the sacrum and the tailbone the other way. So someone who is like having a lot of concerns with leakage, sometimes we need to strengthen their glutes, and we start to see a really big difference just because it creates length in the pelvic floor, and a lengthened pelvic floor can sometimes be a little bit more supportive. Just really quickly going back to like Kegels. So when someone tells me they're doing a lot of Kegels and their pelvic floor ends up being very, very tight, that's not super functional. And the analogy I always give is, would you rather jump out of a window onto a trampoline or onto a cement pavement? So the trampoline is what we want the pelvic floor to be like. We want it to be able to absorb pressure and then sort of return to resting, versus like a cement floor. If you jumped onto a cement floor, you would like break your leg. right?
Yeah,
Because of all that
exactly.
force. So if you can
Yeah.
imagine the pelvic floor being like super tense, almost like a cement floor, it's not really going to do anything to support you. It's not going to like help absorb forces when we're doing activities like jumping or lifting. So yeah, it's super important to have that length within the pelvic floor, because if we can lengthen something, then it has a better chance of generating a force.
So my next question is, I know sometimes a lot of people are uncomfortable with, I know we've kind of touched on this, with stress incontinence is such a common issue with female lifters, especially women with children. What is some like advice you would give to them to help them? And it's like, is there a certain exercise that in general that you can give to people?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's obviously a little bit different, and I do tailor
Yeah.
my exercise programs, like my home exercise programs, to the individual. A couple things like that I would say for all women that are super important is like, one, get to know your pelvic floor. So if you've never looked at your vulva, like take a mirror and go into the bathroom and go and examine the vulva and just sort of learn about what your parts look like. You'd be surprised the number of women I have that come for like
That
one
don't.
session.
Yeah.
And like that one session where we are sort of like, this is your pelvic floor, this is the front, this is the back. And then they come back and they're like, wow, I haven't had any concerns since I saw you. And I'm like, it's just because you connected with your body again. So I would definitely say everybody should look at their pelvic floor or look at their vulva.
Yeah.
And then I always, like, again, look at that like lengthening of the pelvic floor muscles. So if you are doing, like, if you're butt winking, we need to really be thinking about lengthening those muscles. You can do that by, you know, foam rolling. I tend to use like a tune-up ball and get people to sit on them. That's a really like a common exercise that I give to people. And then also looking at like glute strength. So adding some glute strengthening in at the very minimum.
Okay, perfect.
I think what's good is you're mentioning too is like not just the dance movement exercises, but a lot of folks skip that bodybuilding phase of getting functional balance strength, right? Or they just train the front more so than the back muscles, right? And they don't balance out those movements and do an even amount of foundational training. And they just jump right into squats and deads. And I talked about it for over a year on the show of like, that's great. And that may become super strong and powerful and win a bunch of records and competitions. But you know, once again, fitness is subjective, right? Health is subjective. It's not something you can necessarily visually see all the time. Like unless you have a super trained eye. I've trained eye, I notice things all the time when people walk. I'm like, okay, you know, I can tell a lot by the way you walk, right? It speaks to me as a dancer. But you know, it's important to build that strength in there and take that time to build those layers of the foundation, right? Just like you would if you were building a basement properly. And I think it's very important to, like you said, get to know your body, explore different things across disciplines. It's like, come on, boys, where the ballet at? Let's see it, you know, get your balance, right? Lengthen those muscles.
Balance is huge. Balance between like your anterior and posterior chain. And even like, I'm not a great weightlifter. Like I feel like I'm decent at weightlifting, but my weightlifting got significantly better when I started doing more focused glute training. Like I felt stronger, I felt more balanced, and I felt like it wasn't just my quads doing all the work. After about like 6 months of like more focused glute training, and like that piece is really important. And I kept being like, how do I get my squat stronger? Because it felt so front shifted. And then I just started playing around with stuff on my own. And that was like my biggest change, was like that focused glute strengthening.
I think a lot of strength athletes are quad dominant. Like I know I am, and I've heard that from a lot of physios where they're like, oh, you're quad dominant, you know, so it is important to build the glutes, you know, especially. And if you have weak hips, I find it helps as well. I struggle with my hips too. And I think you actually recommended doing glute work for me as well.
Yeah, I remember that. And I also found when I started doing a more focused glute work, my back was no longer sore.
Yeah.
I had
I don't get back pain as much
either. Yeah. So that was like the biggest thing. And, you know, the lovely thing about the internet is you can find so many great exercises to try out. And so I like there's some that I, you know, work probably really well for some people that don't work for me. And then there's other ones that I'm like, this is like my exercise that I love.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you have to compensate somehow, right? And you know, they always talk about weak core, weak back, but like for women, it starts in the pelvic floor, right? Before the core. So you can have, you know, upper abs, and have a flat tummy, but if you have a weak pelvic floor, you're going to have back issues. So, right, like that's sometimes it's not necessarily a direct like weight correlation. It has to do with the inner, deep muscles. That's why Pilates is amazing for that, right?
Yeah.
Anything that opens things out, lengthens it, and balance it out, 100%. But
The big key with that, like your pelvic floor is part of your core. So like people think of their core and they think of their abs, but
Yeah.
actually one of your abdominal muscles is part of your deep core. Like your core is made up of your diaphragm, like your breathing muscle, your pelvic floor. We have like a little muscle in the back called multifidus, and then we have another muscle in the front called transversus abdominis, and that's actually our deep core. Our superficial core is our abdominal muscles. And so that's where like people are like, oh, I'm going to do all these planks or sit-ups to get a stronger core. But really the beauty is that you can apply core exercises to anything. And I did a workshop last night and was showing these women how they could apply their core training into like arm, presses and lateral raises, and how we don't have to actually be doing these like sit-up type exercises. If you want to do them, that's fine. I personally don't train specifically my core, with the exception of when I'm doing a bit of a warm-up.
Well, even when I teach core exercises, I try to get like people to engage their lower abs. And I find a lot of people, like, they won't push their back flat onto the mat or onto the floor when they're doing ab work. And just by doing that little difference, it just engages your transverse abdominis better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really try to do that with my training with people, especially postpartum or post-pregnancy, people who've had children. It like women, it makes a big difference,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big part of it, is that it's like, how can we use our core functionally? And instead of actually focusing on these like core exercises that are really abdominal exercises, how can we make those functional, like lifting your your child's car seat? You can use your core to do those, and then you don't really have to necessarily train your core separately. If you can learn how to apply.
And if you have a stronger core, you're not going to, like you said, you're not going to get as much back pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like I do a lot of unilateral arm exercises, and it's because we have to use that stability. If I'm lifting like a heavy dumbbell overhead with one arm, I have to use that core stability to make sure I'm doing that lift properly to like support my body. So that's how I apply my core training. And I actually just put it right into my workouts with a lot of single arm stuff.
So my next question has to do with pre and postnatal, because we mentioned that you work with that population. So what are some of the services you offer for pre and postnatal care?
Yeah. So I would love it if every single person that was prenatal came in for like at least a pelvic floor examination. And again, getting to know their body and understanding their pelvic floor. That would be like my ideal, like perfect world that I lived in, that everybody would come in for that. So prenatally, it ranges. Some people come in specifically for birth prep. So they're not coming in necessarily with a concern, but they're, wanting to do everything they can to prepare their body to give birth. So that looks like, we talk a lot about breathing. We talk a lot about pelvic floor length. We talk a lot about like perineal massage and the benefits and how somebody can do that. And just teach them about their body. And then we also, in those prenatal appointments, typically talk about the first 6 weeks postnatal, what expectations are going to look like, what they can start doing when. And then we do have a lot of people that come in prenatally with concerns. So, I mean, primarily would be like SI pain or pelvis pain. And then like there are people that have incontinence, there are people that, have constipation. So there can be like a wide range of things that we see prenatally. And then postnatally, again, my ideal world.
Everybody come in.
Everybody would come in at about 6 weeks. We typically do, I always recommend like a 6 week, a 9 week, and a 12 week. And then from there, we can always adjust. We just get them booked in, and then we can always adjust them later. So at that 6 week appointment, we talk about the birth. We learn about, was it a vaginal birth? Was it a cesarean? Because both have benefits for pelvic floor physiotherapy. We do a reevaluation. We look at like incontinence, if there's any prolapse. So prolapse is when the organs are kind of sitting against the vaginal walls and it feels a little bit uncomfortable. And then any other concerns. So whether it may be pain with intercourse or like fear of returning to intercourse. and then how they can sort of get back into the activities that they want to do. So some people are very happy to just, take the baby for a walk in a stroller, and some people want to start running again. So we really tailor their program to what is important to them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Do you ever work with like midwives or doctors directly and with the patients, or is that something that may happen in the future, do you think?
Yeah, we don't work directly with midwives and doctors. We do get a lot of our referrals from the midwives and
Oh,
doctors.
okay, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have some pretty good relationships with a few of the midwifery um, collectives in Ottawa. And then I know a few of the doctors by name, not by meeting them in person, that do
Yeah.
referrals. I would love it in the future for like I think it'd be so amazing for like every woman in Ontario or Canada to like be able to access physiotherapy during the perinatal period, so pre and postnatal,
Yeah.
as sort of like part of their healthcare journey. Like you go for your 6-week appointment with your OB or your midwife.
Yeah.
Like I'd love for everybody to also be like, and then you're gonna go see your physio.
Yeah, it would be a nice little combination to have
Yeah.
that. And probably the women that do reach out to you probably don't have as many issues, especially like if it's not treated within that time frame, right? Doesn't it make it worse? Like if
Uh,
you have a prolapse or if you have something going on with your bladder after birth.
yeah, I wouldn't say like like there are definitely things that you would be doing that aren't going to necessarily make it better. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing like a really good example is if you have prolapse and you can, if you have a habit, like if you're every single time you have a bowel movement, you're pushing, yes, that's going to probably
Okay.
prolapse a little bit worse. So we use more lifestyle changes in those cases.
I noticed that you have some these interesting little puppets and whatnot in some of your social media posts. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah. So all of our clinic rooms have like a pelvis model that shows the like vulva anatomy as well as the internal organs like the bladder, the uterus, the cervix, and then the rectum. We like ours are specifically like have vulvas, but when we have male clients, we just show them the same model, and it's like the muscles are the same. It's just the
Yeah.
appearance is different. And then I have this puppet. It's a vulva puppet, and you can buy them
Yeah.
online. It's called the Wondrous Vulva Puppet. And I ordered mine like, I don't know, 2014. And I ordered like the woman who makes them, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but if you look up the Wondrous Vulva Puppet, you'll be able to see them. But she does custom vulvas as well. So you can get one that's like leopard print with lace and like a pearl.
That's so cool.
So mine, yeah, so mine is purple because purple's my favorite color.
Yeah.
And it like has some silk pieces, but it's a really great tool to show like, this is the labia and this is the clitoris and this is the clitoral hood. This is what the urethra, this is where the urethra is. But it's also kind of cool because it's a puppet. I can show sort of what prolapse looks like when people
Yeah.
are curious about it. So I bought it, yeah, many years ago, and it's like one of my favorite tools.
I like how we've moved away from standard medical vulvas. Not only do we have them, but now they have bling.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm wondering if you can get one that's like has a barbell to it attached to it or something.
Oh, I'm sure that you could order one that has like even like a clitoral piercing if you wanted. Like
That's so funny.
yeah, she has some really cool ones. And I remember I ordered it. Oh my, it was like 2014, but I know so many people who have very similar ones because it's like such a cool tool to be able to educate.
Yeah. And plus it probably lightens the mood too, right? Like you bring out this puppet and you're like not as, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And people think it's hilarious and they love how it
Yeah.
looks. And yeah, it's really fun. They do all sorts, like not that company, but I've seen all sorts of like plush organs. Like I saw this company that was doing like a plush uterus and like a plush bladder. And I'm like, oh, we need to get those. And we can like do the whole anatomy just in plush.
I noticed too that you have like a very good social media like presence, and you give a lot of good information on your social media, like different exercises and whatnot. Do you want to go into what first of all, what your handle is on like Instagram, and tell us a little bit about your videos that you make?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really active on Instagram. So I have 2 handles that I manage. One is actually 4 handles, but one is my dog's.
Okay.
So personal. I won't share those ones. So my physio is at Lisa Flanders Physio. And then the clinic is at Bloom_Health_Ottawa. So on mine, I keep it like a little bit lighter and try to be like funny and bring humor in and try to break the stigma. And then we do the same thing on our clinic page. It's just like a tad bit more professional, I find.
Yeah.
And my inspiration honestly comes from my patients. Like a lot of people will ask me the same question in a week and I go, oh, I'm going to address that on social media.
Yeah, that makes sense because you might
Yeah.
as well use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where most of my
Wait,
inspiration comes from.
back it up. You have Instagram for your dogs.
For my
That's
dog-
like next level. I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty VIP when you have them for your kids, but dogs, what's going on? I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
I have one for my dog too.
Yeah,
But
I didn't want to spam people on my personal page with my dog, so I just made him his own Instagram, and it's super fun. It's like him. He follows all these other dogs, and it's like other dogs follow him. So it's really fun.
taking that taboo out is very important though, because like it's still like that with weightlifting sometimes. And then, women have suffered and died when we talk about medical health because it's taboo. For some women, some cultures, it's still very taboo to talk about pelvic floor or the downwards area. So we need to still work to like take the stigma out and make it fun and make it friendly and not so white and sterile and medical, and take away the shame and understand that we're all at different levels regardless of how we appear on the outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
great that you're doing that.
And so then the other piece that I'm really is like my little passion project is I started an Instagram or not Instagram, sorry, a YouTube channel in 2018. And
Okay.
my videos, the concept behind the videos was because people always come into the clinic and say, oh, this might be TMI, but this is happening. And I was like, that when you come into my office, that like TMI does not exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything, and it's going to stay in this room. So I actually created a series of videos. I think we're up to like 32 some odd videos now. And it's called It's Not TMI. And I address those questions that people are often too embarrassed to ask. So I have a video on like if you pee when you skip, or if you pee when you do jumping jacks.
Yeah.
I did one on queefing because somebody asked a question about that.
That's awesome that you have this for women because like we need this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like even just basic stuff like this is your vulva or like this is your clitoris, and talking about those things. And I try to keep them really short because I know that people don't have super long attention spans. So they're all under 5 minutes. And like I think my biggest views on my videos is my first video I ever did was, and it's terrible when I go back to look at it, it's so poorly done, but I have like 500,000 views on it. And it's just really like your vulva anatomy. And so that's like a really big passion for me that I'm like really trying to break down like the stigma around women's health, the stigma around pelvic health, and educating people in like a safe, comfortable way.
Have you ever thought about doing an Instagram for your pillow?
For my like the vulva, like a vulva Instagram.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, like have her whole personality around her and like.
Oh, that would be such
just
a
an
good
idea.
That'd be such a
Or
good
a
idea.
YouTube video on it or something.
Yeah, well, the vulva puppies have appeared in quite a few of my YouTube videos, just because it's like an easy way to like educate people.
Yeah.
And show them what things look like. But yeah, an Instagram for the vulva, that'd be hilarious.
Well, I wanted to thank you for everything today. So how can people get in touch with you? And can you tell us a little bit about your practice in Ottawa?
Yeah, absolutely. So our practice is it's very central Ottawa. We are on Carling Avenue. So Bloom Integrative Health and Movement Center. The best way to get into contact with us here is either by email, which is info@bloomhealthottawa.com, or our phone number is 613-725-9496. Or like even just contacting us through the website. The lovely thing about technology nowadays is you can do a lot of your booking online. So to book an appointment, people can book online. Your initial assessment, you do have to call the clinic to book that in because we always recommend people book their follow-ups when they book their initial visit, just to make sure that you can get the appointment times that you want.
Okay.
So we usually get you to book like 2 or 3 follow-ups as well. And yeah, on Instagram at bloom_health_Ottawa. And also we have a Facebook page too. It's not super active, but we do have a Facebook page, and we do have a very inactive TikTok page, but maybe one day we'll get more into that.
Yeah, it seems to be that's where everybody's going now is TikTok.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? If you make a TikTok, you need to make it with the vulva, and you
Yeah.
should call her the voluptuous or the voluptuous or the volatile vulva. You can give her moods and personalities. So before you go though, like I said, if you guys want to get information and connect with our guests on the show, check out our Facebook group, Strong Women of Canada. We also have a group called Team Panda Strong, where we post fitness tutorials and challenges from our elite sponsored athletes like Hilda, as well as recipes. I'm all about that carnivore life and a bit of the keto. So check that out. And obviously we have a YouTube channel as well. So if you want to do one of our fitness challenges, you can actually win some gift cards to our merch and some prizes from our sponsors and our guests on our show. So be sure to check that out. And if you like what you've heard so far, please share, like, and review us and rate us, because we need those stars in our life. Also, going back to some things, what are some workouts you would recommend that, everyone's different, and obviously you need to meet with them in your practice, but what are some practical workouts or starting points people can do at home if they want to test where their pelvic floor health is, and to figure out if they need to come in and see you or that kind of thing? What are some challenges they can do to assess themselves?
Yeah, I always get people to start with breathing. So, I mean, learning how to breathe is one of the key components of having a healthy pelvic floor. On our YouTube channel, actually, my colleague did this amazing series that starts just from like how to breathe to how to connect with your pelvic floor. I would definitely recommend starting with something like that. So learning how to do what we call a 360 breath. And if you can't, then doing some pretty simple stretches, which she created in a video. So like moving the thorax around, doing some rotation, and then learning how to connect with those different parts of the body. And if you're feeling like I can't really connect this way, or like my breath doesn't seem to be doing what I want it to do, then that's a really good sign to start coming in for a physiotherapy appointment and learning a little bit more about your body.
And that's not just important for women as well, because like even in powerlifting, we talk about the 360 breath. So that's something men could benefit from as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the videos are not like, they're very like unisex, like anybody can do them, all genders, like learning how to breathe, learning how to, connect with your front, middle, back, learning how to connect with your transversus abdominis. And, doing something like that, if you're saying like, I'm having a hard time 360 breathing, like right there, that's a cue, going to see someone, working with them for that, whether it's a physio or like a fitness pro that has that sort of understanding and background. Like that's probably like your number one way to start, is like, can you breathe through your whole thorax and abdomen?
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so smart, and I challenge you to make a TikTok and video, an educational video with this vulva, because I need to meet her. She sounds fabulous. Like, she has great style.
Yeah.
And if you need help naming her, I got some ideas. And I would love to see a little challenge for our followers to check out what's going on down there. I mean, you need to know. Okay.
Absolutely. And I did a whole video about where to start, like how to look at your vulva and what to look at. And I even gave you I gave a diagram, and I said, like, can you identify these parts of your vulva? That's the best place you can start, is like, get to know your body.
And and we're so not connected with that area, because it's so, you know what I mean? It's not like men where it's just out there. Sorry to say it like that, but you know what I mean?
It's true though.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Cross your legs, don't touch, keep it clean, keep it covered, Yeah.
Yeah, I think nowadays we're getting more comfortable with talking about things, but I know even growing up, like I grew up in the 80s, so it was like something we wouldn't talk about at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think it is getting better, but there's so far we can go. And like, really, show women's health, that it's at the forefront. It's important. It's just as important as men's health.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for being on the show. We loved having you. Like I said, we are going to post the links to her social media and her practice. And I'm also going to share these videos she speaks of. Make sure you send them on to me, Lisa, because I am going to share the living heck out of them. And I challenge you guys to do one of these challenges. And you don't have to buy a vulva. No vulva required. Just use your own. I have a quick question for you, actually, before we go on the subject. Curious minds want to know. So I don't remember the technical term for it, so excuse my français. But there's a thingy that you can stick up in there, and a lot of women just hang weights from it. You know what I'm talking about? Squats and workout. What's your thoughts on that? I have my own, but I'm very curious. What's your thoughts on, does it work? Is there a better way? Is it dangerous? Because I mean, it's really taboo. And there's a few Instagram girls that are all about that, just walking around with their lady balls.
Yeah, no, there's a Benoit balls. I think there's like Benoit balls and like the jade egg and all these different things. So again, going back to like how the muscles also need to be able to lengthen. I don't think it's advisable. I don't think it's beneficial to walk around all day with your muscles on, right? Our muscles need to also lengthen, relax. It'd be very similar to if you were challenged to walk around all day with like a dumbbell in your hand and you had to keep it in a bicep curl, right? Like you'd be really fatigued by the end of the day. Yeah. And so I don't ever prescribe them to people. It's not something that I think is necessary. I think there's like ways that we can engage and strengthen our pelvic floor differently.
So on the same topic with the apparatuses, I've noticed that there is a lot of different like anti-leakage type of I don't know what they're called again, but for incontinence. Yeah, and I noticed them. Yeah, I've noticed them more on like different social media platforms lately. Yeah, because I'm talking to you and it's coming up. You know what I mean? Like.
Pessaries can be beneficial. So I do have some patients that use them like specifically for physical activity because they do either feel a little bit more heavy when they're doing their activities, or they do have a little bit of leakage. So that can be a different tool. They're not weighted. I do sometimes prescribe pessaries to people. It just depends on if that's the route they want to go. But the weights, I don't think that they're super beneficial because I think that you need to be able to lengthen the pelvic floor and shorten the pelvic floor. And so if we're just shortening, that's not necessarily going to help either. And that's not going to create that like trampoline. It's going to be more like that cement floor.
There's also something that I listen to a lot of podcasts. One of them is Sex with Emily. Yeah. And she talks about like, I think it's almost like controlled by the phone, where it goes inside and does Kegels, helps you with Kegels and whatever. Do you think that's beneficial, or is that just another gimmick?
Yeah, again, I think it can be gimmicky. It's one of those things though, if someone is having a really hard time, the thing I like about that, I think there's one called like the LV or something like that.
I think that's the one that she recommends on her podcast.
Yeah, the thing I like about that one a little bit more is that it is going to also focus a little bit more on the lengthening piece, because I think you have to sort of like jump over stuff. So you get the burst of strength and then the relaxation. So I don't mind that one as much. Would I have someone go buy one? It depends on what the price point is. If someone already had one and really wanted to use it, yes, I would absolutely help them to use it appropriately.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to bring that. I just remembered as Stephanie was talking, I remembered all of these things that I've seen. So I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we need to be buying anything specific, with the exception of pessary. I do sometimes recommend those, but
and that would depend on the severity of the incontinence, right?
Yeah, and incontinence, but also prolapse. So if someone's having like heavy prolapsy type symptoms when they're doing physical activity, that can be a really good supportive device as well.
Okay, perfect.
I can't remember what it's called, and I can't remember who sells it, but it just popped in my head now. But there's like balls, I believe, that you can also sit on and then kind of not ride them. That's like not the greatest term, but like you kind of just tilt your pelvic floor in a non-sexual way, forward and backwards, to kind of work on it. But I mean, I feel like even just sitting on a ball like an ergonomic ball chair, right? That can help doing those kind of hip movements, hula hooping, that type of thing. But my personal belief as a dancer is you go from static movement to PNF stretches, because that lengthens the muscles. So that's kind of like yoga. Pilates is, ply yoga essentially, right? So you build that up, and then you go into much longer static stretches, right? And then the active movement piece is huge. But you can do a lot without equipment. And I see so much equipment nowadays that's like, yeah, but like kickbacks, donkey kickbacks, where you would just, push your foot in the strap and then, pull the weight away from you. Now we've got the monkey, what are they? The monkey, whatever, something called out. Joe Rogan was talking about his podcast once, but they're popular. And that's just to do what you're talking about, like single leg raises. So it's like, as a dancer, when we're teaching dance, how we assess people, it's very complicated. There's lots of levels, but basically you want to train your body equally from one side to the other, right? And you can do all of that without equipment. Equipment should essentially be, once you've got that foundational strength, it should be to add added resistance, right? And add challenge, or for the sensory output, that connection, like what you're talking about. So those devices, like you said, can be really good for people. Like I would say, in my opinion, I want to hear your thoughts about it, especially for folks who've had traumatic, birth, C-section, or have had an episiotomy like me, where, that got all, wasn't the same after. So what are your thoughts on that before you go?
Yeah. So I really like to help people be as successful as they can with their home exercise program. So if we can really limit the equipment to things that they have lying around the house, then that's going to be the ideal. So I always say, like, what equipment do you have at home? Do you have this and this? Is that going to be a barrier if you don't have it and you have to get it? So like when you're talking about, like, I think that somebody made like a taint ball, like that you sit on the patio. And I give that exercise a lot. But I just say, like, do you have a tennis ball or lacrosse ball? Like, if you have kids, does the kid have like a ball that you can use? It needs to be about this large. So do you need to buy the specific ball for that? No, unless you want to, and that's fine if you want to. But there's so many things around your house that you can use. Like, even I've had people like sit on a pool noodle before, because it's about the same size and it's pretty soft. That's a great way to start. Or like sitting on a rolled towel. That's also a really easy way. Everybody has towels in their house, I hope. So like a hand towel, we can roll it up and sit on it, and we get very similar benefits without having to spend, all this money on something that's like specific for this thing.
100%. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show. Yeah, so much great information. And like I said, you guys check out her videos. And if you need any other information, obviously, if you're in the area, get hooked up with her. She's great. If you have any questions for us, feel free to comment. We will get back to you. Thanks again for tuning in, pandas. Have a wonderful day. Don't forget to be fabulously savage, sassy, classy, and of course, a little bit assy, because we all know, thanks to Lisa, that helps build your pelvic floor.